guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I have Becca's Bookopoly round 27. If you guys are unfamiliar with Bookopoly at all, this is my TBR game based on Monopoly. Every month we roll the dice, we land on a square, every square has a prompt, and I have to pick a book that fits that prompt. If this is the first time any of you guys are seeing Bookopoly, I will link January's Bookopoly up here for you, which has a recap of the rules and a full tour of the board, and the full Bookopoly playlist with all 27 rounds will be linked in my description box. But for those of you who are familiar with how this works, let's see how I did last month. Now, last month I was a foolish girl and I shot myself in the foot because we had 6 books on Bookopoly. The first one was Secrets of the Star-Crossed by Clara O'Connor to read a book for review. We then had Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which was a sci-fi. The Emperor of Evening Stars by Laura Thalassa, which was a pet pick. Suicide Club by Rachel Heng, which was a community shelf card, and the card was Curtis' pick. We then had Dawnshard by Brandon Sanderson, which was to read fantasy. And finally, Desperate Measures by Katie Robert, which was to read a romance. And I said that this only added up to 1,800 pages, so I would easily get it done. And at this current moment, when I am filming this, I have 1.5 days of the month left, and I have managed to read 4 of these. I am going to finish the 5th one, which is Dawnshard, today, and then tomorrow I will be starting Suicide Club by Rachel Heng. So technically, no punishment, but I really am cutting it fine here. I could have accomplished this easily, but I had grand plans and just kept squeezing things into February. It's not even like I didn't read a lot. I read a lot, just not what I was supposed to be reading. But luckily, we have once again very narrowly avoided a punishment, and I need to be better at just prioritizing the stack for Bookopoly, getting them done at the beginning of the month, and then reading whatever the hell I want. So in the month of March, I don't have any incredibly grand plans. There is something big going on, but overall, I'm just happy to have a month with 31 days in it, because if there was 31 days in February, I wouldn't have cut it so close. So fingers crossed, I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm actually going to confidently have completed my Bookopoly TBR by the end of March. Now, the one readathon that I'm participating in March is the one that I am hosting, and that is the second 48-hour round of Becca's Bookopoly-thon. This one is very exciting because it is going to be completely live on YouTube for the whole 48 hours. I'm working with 10 wonderful co-hosts who have helped to make this readathon a reality, and if you guys would like to participate in that, then I will link the announcement video up here. But as it is only a 48-hour readathon, I don't really need to consider that when I'm building my TBR. I'll just leave those 2 days free to read whatever I want, which is definitely important during a 48-hour readathon, to read what you're in the mood for and just see what happens during those 2 days, and then get back to Bookopoly when the readathon has finished. But aside from that, I plan on March being pretty chill, so let us get into our first roll and see what Bookopoly has in store for me. Okay, so last month we ended on romance. First roll is a 6, and that is a chance card, and this one is All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. I wonder if I'll actually bother reading this one this time. So roll number 1 was a chance card, and that chance card was All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. You guys may remember this was on my December TBR. I didn't get to it. I think it was a chance card then as well, so it has gone back into the stack, and surprisingly this is one of my chance cards that I would actually really like to read. I still don't know a great deal about this. I don't think I've seen many people review it at all, but it sounds very interesting to me because this is like a sci-fi fantasy. It follows 2 main characters who I believe were friends in college, and in present day the world is ending. They would both like to be the ones to save it, however they are approaching it in very different ways. One of them is taking a scientifical approach, and the other one is a witch who can communicate with animals, and she is pursuing a witchcraft route to solving this problem. Wanted to read this for absolute years. I'm gonna do it in March, guys. I'm going to do it. This is the 3rd Bookopoly TBR I think this has been on, and I never get to it because I always prioritize like read along series, etc. But it's happening. It's happening in March. It is. Roll number 2 is a 7, and that one is fantasy. So role number 2 was to read a fantasy, and this is the prompt that I had my patrons vote on for the month. So for the options that I gave them, we had The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, which is an adult epic high fantasy and the second book in the Mistborn series. We had Truthwitch by Susan Dennard, which is the first book in a young adult, I think, fantasy series. And we had Malice by Heather Walter, which is an ARC. This book is released at the beginning of April, and this is a young adult Sleeping Beauty retelling from the perspective of an evil fairy, but the fairy falls in love with Aurora. So I actually thought that this was going to be really tied, especially between these two books. However, we had a clear winner with like 60% of the votes, and that was Truthwitch by Susan Dennard. Now, as I mentioned, I think that this is young adult, and this follows two witches called Safi and Iseult, and one of them is a truth witch, which means that she can tell when people are lying. Her power is discovered, which sends the two friends on the run, and they become embroiled in the politics of this world. I have to say, I don't know too much about this at this point, but I'm reading this because I am a co-host for the Witchlands Readathon that is created by Jade from JD Reads. I will put a link to the announcement in the description box for you guys, but we are going to be reading a book a month in anticipation for the final book in this series being released in summer, and I'm very excited to be finally reading this one because I wanted to read it for a long time, and it is one of Jade's favorite series. Roll number 3 is a 3, and that is other. So roll number 3 was other, which is any genre that isn't like romance, sci-fi, contemporary, or fantasy. And for this one, I picked The Midnight Queen by Sylvia Hunter. This is book 1 of the Midnight Queen trilogy, and this is fantasy, but I've never heard anybody speak about this, and I've had it for quite some time. And the reason I haven't picked it up is because I believe that this is predominantly historical fiction, and I'm not sure like how much of this book is the fantasy element. I also think that this may have a little bit of romance in it as well, because we are following two main characters. One of them is a scholar who has been disgraced and banished to his tutor's home, where he meets the professor's daughter, who has no magical talents of her own and has been forbidden by her father from pursuing magic. However, she has been rebelliously reading up on magical studies in her father's library, and I'm assuming when she meets the other main character, which is Gray, he starts to teach her, and it goes from there. The synopsis is kind of vague. It sounds like real historical, and I'm not sure like how much is historical, how much is fantasy, but I'm intrigued to give it a try because this one is in my possible unhaul pile, and I really do need to start integrating those books into my TBR so that I can actually read them, decide if I like them, and if not, unhaul them. Roll number 4 is 11, and that is a graphic novel. Roll number 4 was Nice and Friendly. It was a comic or a graphic novel, and for this one I'm going to be reading Rat Queens Volume 4 by Curtis J. Weeb. This is the 4th installment in a comic book series that I've really enjoyed. We are following 4 boozy battle maidens for hire, and after starting one bar fight too many, they are thrown into jail where they must complete quests for the realm in order to earn their freedom. Now, the plot has advanced from that point, but that is the basic starting point going into this. But I just really love the characters and how snarky and aggressive they are in here. This is the volume where the art starts to change, and I have been putting it off a little bit because with the art style changes, I have to leave it enough time that the previous art style is not in my mind so that I don't spend all my time like focusing on the differences. But I do love the story and the characters in here, so I'm really excited to continue. And what will hopefully be our final roll, roll number 5, is a 9 and no doubles. Oh my god. And that is an ebook. And the final roll, roll number 5, we had no doubles this month, is to read an ebook. So for this one, I'm going to be going with the only ARC that I have left to review on NetGalley, which is Beneath the Keep by Erica Johansson. This one is a prequel to the Tailing series, which is one of my favorite series. I really love it. And this was released, like I found it on NetGalley. I had no idea it was coming out. I should have read it in February because it was released at the beginning of February. But this is set before the events of the Tailing series, and it follows a range of characters, but I believe it is surrounding the prophecy that is present in the Tailing series and where that came from, and the information of the prophecy like spreading through the realm. And I also think in the background of that as well, we have the rise of the villain who is in the Tailing series, which I'm really excited about because she's a terrible person. She's like an evil sorceress that rules over a neighboring kingdom, but as a character and as a villain, I absolutely love her. So I'm really excited for all of that. And I'm also just really really excited to be back in this world because I had no idea a prequel was coming. I don't know if there's going to be any more prequels, but I'm excited for this one and I hope I enjoy it as much as I enjoy the core series. So that was my Bookopoly TBR, which is looking pretty reasonable, but as usual there are a few other things that I would like to or need to read in the month, starting with my Inner Circle Patreon pick. If you're in the Inner Circle tier of my Patreon, you can recommend a book. All of the books go in this pot and every month I will pick one out and I have to read it. So I always get nervous about this. Let's see what I'm reading in March. I'm just gonna go for it. This one. And this one is Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. Oh my god, right, okay. This one is Nikki's pick and I believe it's reverse harem erotica, but I'm just gonna get a synopsis so I can give you some sort of information. This was making the rounds on Twitter like a couple of months ago, I think, with people being like, oh my god, this synopsis is wild, why does it exist? So yeah, there's that as well, but I don't think Nikki's actually read this. She would like me to read it so that I can tell her whether it's any good. So this is like a mafia romance, which I've never read one of those, but I have been wanting to for quite some time now, especially after watching like 365 Days. And this follows a young woman whose father has run up a lot of debt, so her father sells her to the Vipers. And it says, I'm theirs in every sense of the word, but I've never been meek and compliant. These men, they look at me with longing, their scarred, blood-stained hands holding me tight. They want everything I am, everything I have to give, and won't stop until they get just that. They can own my body, but they will never have my heart. The Vipers, I'm going to make them regret the day they took me. This girl, she bites too. So I'm intrigued to see what I think about this. Honestly, it could go either way, but I'm interested to find out. And funny that that came up actually, because the next book I'm going to talk about is Fighting Destiny, which is the first book in the Fae Chronicles by Amelia Hutchins. This one was kindly gifted to me by Jessica because it is the first book in her favorite fairy romance series, and I do know a couple of people who have read this recently and really enjoyed it, but thank you so much, Jessica, for gifting this to me. And I am actually going to be buddy reading this with Nikki during March. So February was the month of Bobby, March seems to be the month of Nikki, and I don't know too much about this one. I believe it features a murder mystery. The main character hates the Fae, but the like dark Fae lord wants her to work for him, and I've heard that it's pretty smutty as well. So we'll see what I think about this one, because I've actually know at least one person whose opinions I trust who doesn't like this all that much. But if you search like fairy romance or fantasy romance, this does rank pretty highly, and it is Goodreads list, but for a self-published indie series it is like pretty well known, so I'm excited to give it a try and fingers crossed I enjoy it. And then we have two more books which are hard maybes, but I would really like to at least start them in March. The first one is The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I am a co-host for the Stormlight read along that was created by Catherine from Catherine, and during that we have been reading all of the Stormlight archive. However, we have now got to the point where we're about to read Rhythm of War, and Rhythm of War I believe is the book where all of the elements of the Cosmere start to come into the Stormlight archive, or they're more dominant than they have been so far in the series. And so we have decided that we're going to backpedal a little bit and finish at least First Era Mistborn before we read Rhythm of War. So this is the sequel to The Final Empire, which was my second favorite, I think, book of 2020. And in that we are following a man called Kelsia who is a Mistborn. In this world there are people called Allomancers who can ingest metals and harness their abilities. Most people who are Allomancers can only ingest one metal, but if you are a Mistborn it means that you can ingest and harness the abilities of them all. And Kelsia is putting together a group of talented Allomancers from the like society's underclass to overthrow the Final Empire and the Dark Lord who has ruled for 1,000 years. As The Final Empire was my second favorite book of 2020, I have been desperate to read this one, and once again this is another book that was on December's TBR that I never got around to, but fingers crossed for March. And the final book that I would like to at least attempt is The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. This one was a gift from the wonderful Tracy, so thank you so much to Tracy for gifting this one to me. But this is also the first book in a book club that is happening in my Patreon, but was not created by me. It is a few people in my Patreon Discord server who wanted to read this series, so they're going to be doing that as a book club that's like within my Patreon Discord. And I don't have to read this, but I would like to, because I do definitely want to read at least one book from Anne Rice this year as well. The only thing putting me off is that it's 1,000 400 pages, and I believe that the beginning is very, very slow. I can't even tell you very much about this. I believe that it's gothic, maybe gothic horror, because I think that that is the genre that Anne Rice is most known for writing. But the only synopsis on the back of this is, on the veranda of a great New Orleans house, now faded, a mute and fragile woman sits rocking and the witching hour begins. I don't know, but I'm intrigued. I've heard some good things about Anne Rice's writing, and I would like to try and give this a go in the month of March. So this is my Bookopoly TBR plus Beneath the Keep by Erica Johansson, and it's only around 1,800 pages again, but I'm not making the mistake that I made last month. I'm not going to say anything about how confident I am that I'm going to complete these books, but it is a reasonable amount of pages, and if I don't complete it, that's on me, and I need to do better at prioritizing my actual TBR. And of course, with that being said, when you add the extra books that I would like to read this month as well, it does become quite a substantial amount, but literally, like, this is my priority, and I should, fingers crossed, which I can't now because I'm holding 2 stacks of books, but fingers crossed I should be able to get at least these done. Okay, so that is it for my March Bookopoly TBR. I will have a couple or a few more books that I'll be reading in March for the 48-hour round of Bookopolython, but I don't know what they are, and I probably won't decide until the readathon rolls around. But yeah, it's just, I always have so much to read. I keep saying that one month I'm finally going to catch up, but I'm actually not even sure if that's possible anymore, but I'm definitely gonna at least give it a good try. So please let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you guys thought of them. Aside from that, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head to my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. So that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.